With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey. This is a bunch of stuff, deal.
What does that mean, a bunch of stuff?
Well, it means it's simply inaccurate.
It's Irish.
It's Irish. It is. We Irish call it malarkey.
Thanks for the translation.
No,
Okay.
We Irish call it malarkey.
You know what this is? Yeah, and I reserve this word for those rare instances when it's truly deserved. This is malarkey.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
Direct from the King Spring Studios in beautiful Smyrna, Georgia. This is a bunch of malarkey. Now, here's your host, the incredible Charlie McMahon.
Thanks so much to Hall of Fame legendary radio personality Scott Shannon for our weekly introduction. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to yet another episode of A Bunch of Malarkey as we close out the month of January and welcome February in just a few days. A longer leap year February here in 2020. So you get that extra day in February in case 28 days just wasn't quite enough. So we thank you for a great week last week. We're headed for another record-breaking month of listenership. That'll be, I think, 18 or 19, however long we've been on the air. 19 months now. Every single month we've gone up in listenership, and we are creeping ever so closer to that 400,000 download milestone, which should come in about a week and a half. So we'll keep you posted on that. But as I always say, we cannot do it without you, the listeners, and for you spreading the word about A Bunch of Malarkey to your friends, family, coworkers, and on social media. Now, there was lots of interaction with the show on social media last week. So if you're new to the show, how do you get in touch with the Bunch of Malarkey podcast? Maybe you have an idea for a show topic. Maybe you want to be a guest. Maybe you know someone who would like to be a guest that has a great topic. Get in touch with us at a bunch of malarkey pod show at gmail.com. That's a bunch of malarkey pod show at gmail.com. You can private message us on our Facebook page, A Bunch of Malarkey. You can contact us on Twitter at Malarkey Pod Show. Find us on Instagram at A Bunch of Malarkey Podcast. So there's so many ways to get in touch with the show, and we appreciate your input, your voting on the different polls every week, and your input as far as our topics go each and every week. So was it cold where you lived this past week? I know if you live on the East Coast, from Maine all the way down to Florida, and even in the midsection of the country, it was cold this past week. Now, for it to be cold in Florida, that was pretty unexpected. It usually doesn't get cold in Miami and South Florida and stuff like that. But this week, it got cold down there. Now, mango season may be months away down in Florida, but if you lived in South Florida this week, your trees may have been ripe for the picking of iguanas. That's right, folks. Iguana meat, dubbed chicken of the tree, started showing up on Facebook Marketplace last week as the temperature dipped into the 40s. The green iguanas are an invasive species, stunned lifeless by South Florida's occasional cold snaps, and they die if the chilly weather holds for any lengthy period of time. The National Weather Service even tweeted to watch out for falling iguanas this past week. That apparently makes them easy pickings for backyard harvesters, only in Florida, folks. Several ads for skinned and butchered iguanas looking like a Peking kind of duck were posted in Miami, Doral, and Homestead's Facebook Marketplace sites. Some of the ads, however, were posted days ago and show iguana meat that had been clearly frozen, though not by South Florida's climate. At least one ad showed what looked like a freshly prepped garobo. I hope I'm saying that right. A name often used as interchangeable for iguana in parts of Latin America. The animals may be slightly different species, but both are often found as an invasive in South Florida. But can you actually eat them, or should you? You absolutely can, as long as the food comes from a reputable processor. According to the University of Florida Institute for Agriculture Sciences, they are commonly hunted in Central and South America and parts of the Caribbean and are an economical source of protein. But with the abnormally cold temperatures, iguanas, like I mentioned, are freezing in the Sunshine State and falling from the trees. And because of this, a Florida resident who is originally from Central America had a pretty big surprise last week. Because it's a delicacy in Central America, it's something over there they're farmed for food. So this guy thought, wow, I just have a bunch of protein here that's falling from the trees. I'm going to round them up and try to sell them. So he put them all in his car. They all appeared to be dead, and they fell out of the trees. He loaded up his car. They turned gray and were not moving, and they were very cold to the touch. So he figured he's going to round these suckers up, put them in his car, and go sell them for money. So he rode around in the car with them, and he was stocking up for some big barbecue or some big sale, when all of a sudden, due to the warm temperatures in his vehicle, the iguanas came back to life. And all of a sudden they started running around his car, which caused him to have an accident. So a lesson for you folks, don't put frozen iguanas in your car and start driving. They will come back to life, and that is all on frozen iguanas. Now, I don't buy any food from Facebook marketplaces. These people that say they bake cookies at home, I'll sell you a dozen cookies for $3. All these home, because you don't know how filthy these people's houses are. You know how obsessed I am with people being filthy and public toilets and all this stuff. You know, we're almost 70 episodes into A Bunch of Malarkey. You know my obsession with this shit. So I'm not going to buy something off of a Facebook marketplace from some home kitchen that's never inspected by the Board of Health. You don't know if their cats are crawling across their counters, the dogs are shitting on the floor 2 feet away from the cookies. You don't know what the hell's going on in these private kitchens. But you see it all the time on Facebook Marketplace. These home bakers jarring different things. I don't want anything. As we say up north, I skeeve. I don't want anything to do with it. So in San Antonio, a woman, she was trying to make an extra couple of bucks the honest way by selling homemade tortillas on the Facebook. Here we go again, folks. Facebook Marketplace. But apparently, she's not up to date with the latest in dildo designs. You heard that right. The woman, her name is Peggy. She began selling her tortillas on the Facebook Marketplace to help illustrate that her tortillas were authentic and scratch-made and worth purchasing. Peggy included a picture of some freshly rolled dough in a post with the rolling pin she used in the shot of the tortillas, the flour on the counter, and her rolling pin, or so she thought it was a rolling pin. Except that the rolling pin was a big purple dildo, and people pretty much immediately called out that Peggy was using an expert-sized sex toy to roll out her fresh tortillas. Whether in knowing denial or out of a genuine belief that she was using a real rolling pin, Peggy insisted to her disgusted and troubled potential customers that no, it was indeed a fun purple rolling pin. A rolling pin that also vibrated, she claimed. Yeah, that's a dildo. It's also labeled Durex, which is a condom and sex toy brand that has 0 kitchen appliances in its catalog of products. It's a 1,000,000% a dildo, and she used it to roll out her tortillas. A few observations now. It's fitting that this woman's name is Peggy and that she's from Texas, because this feels like the plot of a King of the Hill episode. All she needs now is a husband named Hank to scream bah, when he finds out that his wife has been rolling her delicious fresh tortillas with a dildo. At least Peggy was so clueless about her vibrating rolling pin, that is, actually being a dildo, that we can be reasonably assured that the thing wasn't pulling double duty, that it was just being used as a rolling pin. Or can we? Unless she bought it used at a garage sale or something. Do not eat these tortillas. That's basically the point here, folks. Now, you get people that put free shit up on these marketplaces, and then you got to go to their houses or porch pickup, all this crazy stuff. My wife does it. I'm not crazy with some weirdos coming to my porch and putting money under the welcome mat. It's all very weird. This whole thing, even garage sales are weird. You get all these nuts showing up 2 hours before the garage sale starts, circling the block. Early birds, they call themselves, or whatever the fuck they call it. I'm not a big fan of this. Well, this couple in California was arrested after police say they took the law into their own hands. Authorities accused Corey Cornut and Savannah Griot of leaving a bicycle unattended in their yard to lure potential thieves. When the burglars or the robbers would take the bait, the couple would run out of their home with a baseball bat and beat the thieves, and they filmed the attacks and posted them on YouTube. I can hear it now. World Star. Officials have linked the couple to at least 4 of these assaults that occurred near their home between July and November. The victims were not identified but reportedly suffered various non-life-threatening injuries. The couple was taken into custody this past week on suspicion of assault with a deadly weapon and conspiracy. So they're staging a bike in the yard, and these unsuspecting, they shouldn't be going on the property and taking it. I'll give them that. But this whole thing is staged, trying to lure people to beat them and then film it and put it on YouTube. So you got some sick fucks out there, folks. Now, do you go to thrift stores? I don't really particularly like thrift stores, especially with, like, for furniture, bed bug infestations. People actually buy mattresses in these places. It's crazy. I could see, like, a piece of glassware or a little trinket for the shelf, a pretty vase or something like that. But people are buying couches, and you don't know what kind of, again, what these people did on this couch, who's rolling dildo tortillas on the couch. Well, you don't know what's going on these couches and beds. But what if you bought a couch from a thrift store, and when you brought it home, you found $43,000 in it? Well, it happened to a Michigan man, and he decided to return the cash. Howard Kirby likes to shop at the Habitat for Humanity Restore in Owasso, which is 30 miles west of Flint, Michigan. He purchased the couch from the store in December for his man cave, but this weekend he made a shocking discovery. The couch was filled with thousands of dollars in cash. I still have to pinch myself to make sure I'm not dreaming or something, he said. Kirby said he had the ottoman for a few weeks before noticing it was uncomfortable. That's when his daughter decided to open it up. That's when she started pulling out this, Kirby said. A total of $43,170 was found in the ottoman cushion. Kirby said he didn't feel right keeping the money, so he reached out to the store to find out who had donated the couch. It turns out it was Kim Newberry. The couch originally belonged to her grandfather, who died last year. It's just crazy, Newberry said. On January 16th, the Restore held a big surprise for Newberry to give back every penny found in the cushion. It's completely awesome, she said. Kirby said an attorney told him he had no legal obligation to give the money back, but he felt he had to for moral reasons. That is something Rick Merling, the Restore manager, thinks is heartwarming. To me, this is someone that, despite what they're going through and in spite of their own needs, says, I'm just going to do the right thing. Kirby said he could have used the money because he needs a new roof on his home pretty badly, but he feels better knowing the money is in the rightful hands. I always thought, what would I do if that ever happened? Now I know, and it makes me feel good. Now, what would you do, folks? $43,170 in an old ottoman couch. I'm sorry, I'm keeping it. Come on. How many people out of 10? I'll put up a poll. I'll say 80% of you will keep that money. We're going to put a poll up this week and find out, in addition to the poll, which actually segues perfectly into our favorite segment.
A bunch of malarkey.
Mutant of the Week.
Now here's Charlie.
Now, last week, I think it was kind of like an upset win. I really thought the vote was going to go the other way, but in a 58 to 42% margin, the big box bomber, the lady who built an impromptu bomb in one of the aisles of a Walmart in Tampa, she beat the dueling divorcee, the guy who asked a judge if he could duel his ex-wife for custody and tax money. 58 to 42, the big box bomber is our mutant of the week until one of these two nominees takes the crown away from the big box bomber. Now, where do you vote? If you're new to the show, where do you vote for the mutant of the week? You go to our Facebook page, A Bunch of Malarkey, like the page. The poll comes out every Tuesday morning, bright and early, sometimes late Monday night, and runs through Saturday. So you have 5 full days to vote for the mutant of the week. And here are our nominees. Now, I will say ahead of time, no Florida nominee this week, if you can believe that. So one of these two will dethrone the big box bomber. Our first mutant comes from Bartow County, Georgia, not too far from the King Springs studio. A suspected burglar had to call 911 for help after he got stuck under a pile of tires at a Bartow County store police say he broke into. Nathaniel King, he's 30 years old, he was trapped in the Cartersville shop Sunday with no way to get out. Police say King broke through the rear door of the store, of the tire shop. A towering rack of tires was there to greet him. As the suspect made entry, he came inside the business and the tires fell on top of him, trapping him under the tires, said Michael Bedikofer with the Cartersville Police Department. Buried under many pounds of rubber, police say the man was in a desperate situation. The business was closed, no one was around, so he called 911. Here's how the call went. Bartow County 911, what's the address of your emergency? I'm in Cartersville, Georgia. Where are you at? Hello? Help me. Okay, where are you, sir? I'm in a tire shop in Cartersville. Okay, can you tell us exactly what is wrong? Can you hear me? I think the tire rack is going to kill me. Sparing no time, a police officer answered the call to find the suspect's unusual predicament under pressure. He observed the suspect underneath the tires yelling for help. The officer was eventually able to make entry to that business and get the tires off him and get him out. Officials said he told the officer that he was being chased and made entry into the business to get away from whoever was chasing him. Officials say that they have no evidence the man was being chased. The suspect wasn't hurt and remains in the county jail on criminal trespass charges. So let's call him, appropriately, the buried burglar. So the buried burglar out of Georgia is our first mutant nominee, and he will go against a man from Wisconsin. A 26-year-old man is accused of selling drugs that were mixed with his mother's ashes. Police say that Austin Schrader, of Menomonee Falls, I guess that's the town in Wisconsin, he admitted to investigators he cut the drugs using his dead mother's cremated remains, but he didn't explain why. Investigators say they received a tip about Schrader and his girlfriend selling drugs out of their apartment. According to the criminal complaint, twice last week, investigators sent an informant to the apartment. They said the informant was able to buy marijuana. A few days later, police returned and searched the apartment. Investigators say they found 70 grams of marijuana and a small amount of MDMA, bongs, and a drug scale. According to the complaint, Schrader tried to explain the large amount of unknown powder and vegetable material located in the apartment, saying he mixed these substances for a variety of reasons. Schrader said his mom died a little more than a year ago, and according to the complaint, Schrader indicates he took some of her ashes and mixed them with a variety of substances, some of which he ultimately ingested. The complaint doesn't indicate whether or not he mixed the cremated remains in any of the drugs he is accused of selling. Schrader and Caitlin Geiger, 21, of Menomonee Falls, each will face felony drug charges. There is no explanation in the complaint as to why he allegedly admitted to ingesting his mom's ashes. The couple will appear in court on Tuesday. They were released on a signature bond and scheduled to be back in court on the 28th of January. So let's call him the mommy mixing madman. So we got a couple of heavyweights this week, the buried burglar and the mommy mixing mailman. So make your vote count. Go to our Facebook page, A Bunch of Malarkey. Poll goes up very early Tuesday before you're even up for work. Runs through Saturday midday. 5 full days to vote. Who's it going to be this week, folks? Is it going to be the buried burglar or the mommy mixing madman, not mailman? So, folks, it's time for our weekly topic. Now, when I say the word family, what pops into your head? Dysfunction? No, I'm just kidding. For most, it's the heterosexual couple, the man, the woman, a couple of kids, perhaps a dog or a cat. But over the decades, especially the past few decades, the family unit has changed in America and in many parts of the world as well. Same-sex couples have finally been given the legal right to marry in the United States and in many other countries. That has changed the stereotypical image of family and marriage, but so has another factor, the choice by many married couples to remain child-free. Now, the iconic picture of the traditional American household has faded over the last 4 decades as the number of married couples with children has seen a steep decline and more people are living alone, according to the United States Census Bureau data. Over the last half century, the trend in the United States has been towards smaller households, fewer family and married couple households with children, and more people living alone. While married couples with children were the majority decades ago, now nearly 57% of U.S. households are childless. In 2012, about 29% included childless married couples, and nearly 28% included people simply living alone. So that 28 plus the 29 equals the 57. So what is child-free, folks? Being child-free is the voluntary choice to not have children. In most societies and for most of human history, choosing not to have children was both difficult and undesirable. The amount of reliable contraception, along with support provided in old age by one's government, like Social Security, rather than one's family, has made childlessness an option for people in some, though they may be looked down upon in certain communities. The usage of the term child-free to describe people who choose not to have children was coined in the English language in the late 20th century. According to various studies, the level of a woman's education is the most important factor in determining whether she will reproduce. The higher level of her education, the less likely she is to bear children, or if she does, the fewer children she is likely to have. Overall, researchers have observed childless couples to be more educated, and it is perhaps because of this that they are more likely to be employed in professional and management occupations and are more likely for both spouses to earn relatively high incomes and to live in urban areas. They are also less likely to be religious, subscribe to traditional gender roles, or subscribe to conventional roles. Being a child-free American adult was considered unusual in the 1950s. However, the proportion of childless adults in the population has increased significantly since then. The proportion of childlessness among women aged 40 to 44 was 10% in 1976, reached a high of 20% in 2005, and then declined to 15% in 2014. In Europe, childlessness among women aged 40 to 44 is most common in Austria, Spain, and the United Kingdom. Among surveyed countries, childlessness was least common across Eastern European countries, although one-child families are very common there. From 2007 to 2011, the fertility rate in the United States declined 9%. The Pew Research Center reporting in 2010 that the birth rate was the lowest in the United States history and that child-freeness rose across all racial and ethnic groups to about 1 in 5 versus 1 in 10 back in the 70s. The CDC released statistics in the first quarter of 2016 confirming that the U.S. fertility rate had fallen to its lowest point since record-keeping began in 1909. 59.8 births per 1,000 women, half its high of 122.9 in 1957. Where's that 0.8 and 0.9 of a child? No, I know it's an average. Even taking the falling fertility rate into account, the U.S. Census Bureau still projected the U.S. population would increase from 319 million, which was in 2014, to almost 400 million by 2051. So the population is still growing, but probably not as fast as one would have thought back in the 1950s. The National Center of Health Statistics confirms that the percentage of American women of childbearing age who define themselves as child-free or voluntarily childless rose sharply in the 1990s from 2.4% in 1982 to 4.3% in 1990 to 6.6% in 1995. Most societies place a high value on parenthood in adult life, so that people who remain child-free are sometimes stereotyped as being individualistic. People who avoid social responsibility and are less prepared to commit themselves to helping others. However, certain groups believe that being child-free is beneficial. With the advent of environmentalism and concerns for stewardship, those choosing not to have children are also sometimes recognized as helping reduce our impact, such as members of the voluntary human extinction movement. Some child-free are sometimes lauded on moral grounds, such as members of philosophical or religious groups. Now, supporters of living child-free cite various reasons for their view. Some have competing family or social obligations, such as the role of a primary caregiver to a disabled spouse, sibling, or parent. Some have concerns over the effects pregnancy has on the woman's body, like weight gain, stretch marks, drooping breast, hyperpigmentation of the face, looser pelvic muscles, hemorrhoids, urinary incontinence. Some cite economic insufficiency. Some cite lack of access to support networks and resources. Some just for personal well-being. Some cite existing or possible health problems, including genetic disorders. Some cite reluctance to replicate the genes of one's own parents in cases of child abuse. Some fear that sexual activity may decline after the woman gives birth. Various fears, for example, of being trapped or disappointed, as well as fears for the child. Some cite damage to relationships or difficulties with them after having children. Some fear the physical condition of pregnancy or the actual childbirth experience. Some believe that one can make a greater contribution to humanity through one's work and not by having children. Some cite perceived or actual incapacity to be a responsible and patient parent. Some cite the view that the wish to reproduce oneself is a form of narcissism. Some cite the absence of a partner who can sexually reproduce. Some cite a belief that it is wrong to intentionally have a child when there are so many available children out there for adoption. Some cite concern for environmental impacts such as overpopulation, pollution, resource scarcity, and the resulting effects on the global climate and the welfare of the already existing children. Some people just think it's inherently immoral to bring people into the world. That is, one may generally wish to spare a potential child from the suffering of life. Moreover, the parent can never get the consent of the unborn child. Therefore, a decision to procreate would be an imposition of life. Some cite a belief in a negative declining condition of the world and the culture, and in the need to avoid subjecting a child to these negative conditions. And this goes with global warming effects, war, famine, and things of that nature. Some people believe that people tend to have children for the wrong reasons. They fear social pressures and cultural norms. Some cite adherence to the principles of a religious organization. Some simply cite the dislike of children. Some cite the uncertainty over the stability of the parenting relationship. Some cite the lack of the maternal or paternal instinct. Some believe that they are either too old or too young to have children. Some people choose their career. And last but not least, some people simply don't want to have children. And this is something that some people just can't wrap their heads about. The people who do have children can't wrap their heads around that some women and some couples simply don't want to have children. I don't want to have kids. It's the kind of statement that often prompts total disbelief. I've been there, folks, as a man, so I can't even imagine what a woman goes through, because people expect women to bear children. But even as a man, I've gone through this. It's known to end conversations, leaving behind confused and blank faces and dropped jaws, especially, like I said, when it comes from a woman. The response is usually, you'll change your mind eventually. Now, when you tell me you are planning on having the children, well, I say, you'll change your mind, you won't have them. Now, why? What gives you the right to tell someone who just told you they don't want to have kids that they'll change their mind, right? Child-free by choice. And despite being confident in her or our decision, a couple's decision, we are constantly undermined by society's inability to separate women or married couples from parenthood. Various studies say that sometime in the next decade, the number of couples without children will overtake the number of couples with children. That means more women are choosing not to have kids. It's a trend that is often wrongly labeled selfish, shallow, and immature. There's an assumption out there that you're selfish because you've chosen not to have children. And there's something in that, because if you're having kids, you need to give them everything. But then again, if you're having a kid just so they can look after you when you're older, isn't that pretty selfish? There is no evidence to show that people are more selfless as parents. So if you choose to have children, you're not a better person, and you're no less selfish than someone who chooses not to. And studies indicate that. Whatever the reason, the research shows most women who choose a child-free life are confident in their decision. It's everybody else who seems to struggle with that woman's or couple's decision. There's this kind of cultural ideal that as a woman, you're supposed to want to nurture and care for a child. So when a woman says, I don't want to do that, it's like they're treated like they're not a real woman. Women are made to feel like if they don't use their womb, they're not really a woman, which is totally absurd. It's just the next step you do, society says. You get married and you have kids. That's what society has told us. There's a stunned silence when correcting people who assume they have kids. People always respond with, like I said, you'll change your mind. But how dare you suggest that a woman or a couple made the wrong decision by implying that they'll come to the right one eventually? I would love it if people wouldn't see it as something you lack, but rather as something that embraces other things. So you don't want to have children, but you're embracing something else in the world and you're doing better for society or for the world in other ways. Women without kids just don't face judgment and scrutiny. They can be socially excluded too, and not just during the childbearing years. Now, this is something I've spoke about here on A Bunch of Malarkey. We live in a great neighborhood. 230 homes in our subdivision. We have a clubhouse, 2 pools, tennis courts. Now, I always say in the summertime, we can't get near the pools. It is invaded by hundreds of kids, parents. How am I going to go down there as a child-free man and swim in the pool with 1,000 kids floating around me? Every single event we have at the clubhouse is geared towards children. Halloween parties, Christmas with Santa, Easter Bunny egg hunts. There's nothing for adults here. So we're spending just as much money into the kitty here. We're putting just as much money into the coffers with our HOA fees as everybody else, but we're not getting any of the benefits out of it. They constantly want to improve the playgrounds, which is great. I am all for improving the neighborhood, even if I don't have children. But I feel like we are socially excluded from a lot of things simply because we don't have kids. And now, this could be in small ways like being excluded from conversations, or bigger ways like not being invited to some of these big events or even birthday parties or whatever. Not that I really want to go to a kid's birthday party, but I'm just saying, though, you're totally excluded. So you have to find friends who are in the same situation as you, who don't have kids or maybe have kids that are grown, who have the time. But it's very difficult. It continues throughout your life, though, folks, to the point where women are expected not to just to be mothers, but to be grandmothers as well. So they don't escape it. When they get to be grandma age, people their age are asking them about their grandchildren. You know, women in their 60s and 70s who haven't had any children say it's the first thing people ask, like they used to in their 30s. Except now it's like, tell me about your grandchildren. And if you say you don't have any, the conversation abruptly ends. Couples own age don't seem to know how to talk to couples without children anymore, unless they're in the same boat, because all they seem to talk about is their children or their grandchildren. Because you don't have children, you just don't count. But the best thing about being child-free is not having to think about anyone else in the terms of choices that we make with our life, and our life is more spontaneous, and being true to ourselves. Ultimately, the freedom to choose one way or another is something we should all celebrate. But just how free that choice actually is, when much of society still expects women to choose to be mothers, is something worth considering. Now let's talk about, there's advantages and disadvantages to everything. Now, here's what I see as the disadvantages of having children. You know, lots of couples look forward to parenthood, getting to know a little baby, raising a growing child, developing a relationship with a maturing son or daughter. All over the world, people believe that parenting is the most rewarding part of their lives. And it's good that so many couples treasure that bond with their child, because the transition to parenthood causes profound changes in a couple's marriage and their overall happiness. And it's not always for the better. Families usually welcome a baby to the mix with great expectations, but as a parent's bond with a child grows, it's likely that their other relationships are deteriorating. Research based on decades of studies on the psychological effects of having a child show the following. When people marry, they're usually in love and happy to be tying the knot. But after that, things tend to change. On average, couple satisfaction with their marriage declines during the first few years of marriage. And if the decline is particularly steep, divorce may follow. The course of true love runs downhill. And that's before you factor in what happens when it's time to start buying a car seat and diapers. For around 30 years, researchers have studied how having children affects a marriage, and the results are conclusive. The relationship between spouses suffers once kids come along. Comparing couples with and without children, researchers found that the rate of decline in the relationship satisfaction is nearly twice as steep for couples who have children than for childless couples or child-free couples. In the event that a pregnancy is unplanned, the parents experience even greater negative impacts on their relationship. The irony is that even as the marital satisfaction of new parents declines, the likelihood of them divorcing also declines. So having children may make you miserable, but you'll be miserable together. Worse still, this decrease in marital satisfaction likely leads to a change in general happiness, because the biggest predictor of overall life satisfaction is one's satisfaction with one's spouse or partner. While the negative marital impact of becoming parents is familiar to fathers and mothers, it is especially because so many young couples think that having children will bring them closer together, or at least will not lead to marital distress. This belief that having children will improve one's marriage is a tenacious and persistent myth among those who are young and in love. It seems obvious that adding a baby to a household is going to change the dynamic. And indeed, the arrival of children changes how couples interact. Parents often become more distant and businesslike with each other as they attend to the details of parenting. Mundane tasks like keeping kids fed, bathed, and clothed take energy, time, and resolve. In the effort to keep the family running smoothly, parents discuss carpool pickups and grocery runs instead of sharing the latest gossip or their thoughts on the presidential elections. Questions about one's day are replaced with questions about whether this diaper looks full. These changes can be profound. Fundamental identities may shift from wife to mother, husband to father, or at a more intimate level, from lovers to parents. Even in same-sex couples, the arrival of children predicts less relationship satisfaction and sex. Beyond sexual intimacy, new parents tend to stop saying and doing the little things that please their spouses. Flirty texts are replaced with messages that read like a grocery receipt. With nearly half of all births being to unmarried couples, some parents may think they have gamed the system by skipping the wedding. Not so. The relationship burden of having children is present regardless of marital status, gender orientation, or level of income. In addition, the adverse impact of becoming a parent is found in other countries, including those with greater rates of non-marital parenting and more generous family policies. Not surprisingly, it is mothers, not fathers, who bear the heaviest cost of becoming parents. Even when both parents work outside the home, and even in marriages in which both spouses describe themselves as sharing the burden of the household chores, most parents slide toward gender stereotypical ways of parenting. Women are more likely to become the on-call parent, the one who gets up in the middle of the night to bring a child a tissue, or the one who is called by the school nurse. As part of this pattern, new mothers tend to cut their hours outside work, which often leads fathers to feel more of the burden of financial responsibility. A common pattern emerges in which dads start spending more time and energy on outside work, and moms start doing an increasing amount of the child care and housework. Cue the feelings of frustration, guilt, and distress for both parents. New mothers often talk about their social isolation, becoming disconnected from friends and colleagues, and how their world feels like it's shrinking. All of these changes lead to fundamental and long-lasting effects on new mothers' circle of support, including their spouses. The consequences of the relationship strain can be serious. Marital stress is associated with many serious physical health problems, as well as symptoms of depression and other mental health issues. The link between psychological and marital problems is strong enough that researchers have found that couples therapy is one of the most effective ways of treating depression and some other mental illnesses. If the arrival of children is hard on marriages, it is the departure of children good for marriages. Some marriages do improve once the children leave the nest. In other cases, the successful launch of the children leads spouses to discover they have few shared interests and there's nothing no longer keeping them together. These downsides to having children may partly explain why more and more women in the United States and around the world are choosing not to procreate. According to the U.S. Census, the percentage of childless American women from ages 15 to 44 increased a staggering amount in just 2 generations, from 35% in 1976 to 47% in 2010. Despite the dismal picture of motherhood painted by researchers, most mothers and fathers rate parenting as their greatest joy. Much like childbirth, for which nearly all mothers believe the pain and suffering was worth it, most mothers believe the rewards of watching their children grow up are worth the cost to their romantic relationships. Now, as half of a child-free couple, here's some things we want you to know. We want the rest of society to know, the people with children. Here's what we want you to know. First and foremost, we never know how to answer that question. When people ask us why we don't have children, we never know how to answer that question without offending someone. You end up saying things like, oh, you never know, or you smile and shrug and say, we'll see. Well, we don't, but a lot of couples do. All to appease people. When, in turn, child-free couples should say, mind your own fucking business, please. No matter what comes out of our mouths, there's a reaction. There's always a reaction that feels like we are upsetting someone. The thing is, we're happy and we've not wanted more in our life. Unfortunately, society feels differently. And while it's enough for us, it's just not enough for other people. Number 2, we don't hate kids. In fact, most child-free couples like kids. We feel ourselves constantly defending our decision by overcompensating our adoration for children. There have been a few that because we've chosen not to have kids, it means we don't like them. Sure, I don't love a screaming baby in a restaurant, but I think little ones, they're cute, they're fascinatingly smart, well, some of them. Some of them are silly and funny, and some of them are great human beings. Like Sister Sledge once sang, folks, we are family. We've been asked by many people, don't you want a family? This kind of hurts because we are a family. I have a family with my wife and our pets. My friends are like family. But most importantly, the life I've built with my wife and the marriage we have, along with our pets, feels like a family to us. You know, we're constantly rescuing dogs. We have a cat. That's our family. It might not be the family when you think of the word family, but it's our family. I don't understand why people question child-free couples so frequently. I am constantly amazed at how often people ask child-free couples if they plan on having children or have made comments about infertility. Frankly, I'm curious why people care and why people ask people about personal family planning. It can be pretty invasive. Whether you're asking a single person, a married couple, or a family with one child, it's likely best to wait for personal information to be offered instead of prying. I don't ask you why you chose to pop 3 out, then don't ask why we chose not to have any. Another thing, it's not us against you. It's not child-free people against people with children. You know, it's frustrating. I'm frustrated by the parent versus non-parent dialogue that's created by society. And many of us continue to foster this. I'm not going to pretend that parenting doesn't set you apart from a non-parent. You've birthed a child, and we have not. But there's plenty we can offer each other, from career advice to grief support to lifelong friendships that celebrates our differences and lifts each other up. Now, our lives aren't perfect. Yes, child-free couples can travel and go to a lot of movies and do whatever it is people who don't have children do. Child-free couples, Paris photos are your child's first day of school pics, and I think that should be okay. But in everyday life, there are fewer Instagrammable moments for all of us, right? We all have shit going on. And I won't pretend that being child-free is the ideal life. It's just ideal for us. And finally, we're happy. HAPPY, folks. Our child-free marriage does not feel as if it's lacking. We're full of love, we're full of excitement and challenges, and we look forward to the future, even if babies aren't a part of it. So that's, I think, what people think, that we're lacking something in our lives. You know? And here's a big one, too. People think that child-free people don't want to pay school tax, don't want to contribute to anything that helps children or advances other people's children. Now, as I mentioned, I don't have kids, I never will, but I support universal child care and paid maternal leave. Fully support it. I fully support universal health care for children, everybody, parents, everybody. I support tuition-free college through our taxes. I think every child out there, regardless of their economic status, should be able to go to school if they choose. I support an increased minimum wage, especially for entry-level jobs for young people in college and high school. And people say we don't want to pay taxes. I support school taxes. I don't like paying them because we don't have kids, but we pay them. But do I think someone with 6 kids who are draining more resources out of the system should pay more than we do with 0, or somebody with 1 child? Absolutely. It should be proportional, but we all should pay because we all want a better life for people, regardless of their age, economic status, race, religion, sexual orientation. At least that's how it should be. So that's our child free by choice episode. Now tell me what you think. If you have kids, 1 kid, 2 kids, 10 kids, what is your feeling about child-free people? Does it matter to you? Because to a lot of people with parents, they can't wrap their head around 2 people getting married and not having children, whether they're a heterosexual couple or a same-sex couple. People can't wrap their heads out. They're like, why get married if you're not going to have kids? We've heard that a lot too. So let us know if you have children, what your opinion is, or what some stereotypes you think about child-free people. And if you're child-free, tell us what bothered you about people with children, or what are some of the stereotypes, or there's some things maybe that have been said to you about not having children by people with children. So let's open up the dialogue as we always do here on A Bunch of Malarkey. So where are we found, folks? In case you're new to the show, we're on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Radio Public, Radio.com, Stitcher, CastBox, YouTube. And if you have one of those Alexa devices, just say, Alexa, play the podcast A Bunch of Malarkey, and she will play the most recent episode. Get in touch with us again, A Bunch of Malarkey Pod Show at gmail.com, A Bunch of Malarkey Pod Show at Gmail. You can leave us a voicemail on the studio line. Tell us what you thought about the show. You can always call us. We don't answer the phone. It's voicemail only, so let us know, and we could play your comments on the air. 706-406-8212. 706-406-8212. You want to become a sponsor or patron of the show? Many of you have, and I appreciate it. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/abunchofmalarkey. $1 a month, $2 a month, $5 a month, whatever you can afford. Patreon.com/abunchofmalarkey. So folks, if you're spending your week with your children out at the park, the playground, or at a birthday party, or if you're child-free by choice and enjoying the week to yourself with your spouse or with your pets, you still have to beware, because it's a shit show out there. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been A Bunch of Malarkey. Have a great week, everybody. We'll catch you next week. Take care, everyone.